Today we're going to talk about the new Necron models that were previewed, the Lokhust Heavy Destroyer, and the Canoptek Doomstalker. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we're going to focus on the two Necron miniatures that were previewed shortly after they unveiled the Indomitus box yesterday, talk a bit about the models and how they might fit into a Necron list going forward. Let's start out with that Lokhust Heavy Destroyer then. So first of all, it's another insecty sounding Necron name. We've already had the spider spelt wrong, that is the tomb spider, and now we have the word locust spelt wrong, and this guy's a heavy destroyer. I think the name grates a little bit more than the use of spider with a Y. It does just smack a little bit of Games Workshop trying to make things their own unique name so they can protect them legally. Now destroyers never used to have any prefixes before their name. This guy looks very much the equivalent of the standard Necron destroyers, but it sounds like they're calling them Lokhust to differentiate them from the Auspex destroyers, the melee ones that we've seen coming in the Indomitus box. Makes me wonder if we might see any other cults of destroyers. Also, the way that they've called these Lokhust Heavy Destroyers makes me wonder whether we might see just regular Lokhust Destroyers at some point. Although honestly, with the sheer amount of releases that Necrons have got over the course of this 9th edition release, I'm starting to feel it's a little bit unlikely as to whether or not we might see very much more. I guess it is certainly a potential for the future though, if they did want to update and release some smaller destroyers, maybe armed with Gauss cannons like the standard ones, I could give them the option of releasing new weapons with them as well. Necrons also have Destroyer Lords running around at the moment, and the existence of these guys makes me wonder whether or not there'll be a Lokhust Destroyer Lord that comes out, much in a similar fashion to the Auspex Lord in the Indomitus box. There just seems like quite a lot of potential for other options with these guys. I guess we'll have to wait and see as the releases come out. In terms of the model himself, he looks fairly well upscaled from the previous destroyers. It's an analogy that makes me think of the Tau Broadside, when it went from basically being a crisis suit variant to really quite a big walker. This thing looks far beefier than the standard destroyers are at the moment, and I strongly suspect that has to come with a stat line upgrade, maybe being something more like 4 to 6 wounds rather than the 3 that the destroyers have at the moment. Much like the Auspex destroyers, who have blades built into their very arms, this guy seems pretty fused with his weaponry. I guess a bit better to reflect the new fluff of the destroyer cults. I believe in the past they used to be not too dissimilar from the standard Necron warriors, so they very much carried weapons into battle rather than being partially fused into them. I like the way that they've kept the standard tri-lens eye look from the previous destroyers. It's certainly a pretty iconic look, and I'm glad that they managed to keep it over into the newer model. And I've had people have slightly divided opinions on those enormous curved thrusters that aren't in. The ones on the destroyers at the moment are a lot more boxy and look more machine-like. These things certainly look heftier and a lot more capable of hovering this guy aloft in the air, but I have seen some people comment that it just looks like he's got absolutely enormous thighs, which to be honest I can't see. He's got an interesting axe-like bayonet on the end of that gun as well. I've also seen some people thinking, would it be possible to turn that bayonet round? Maybe make him look a little bit more aggressive? I guess depending on how the sprue is put together, that might be able to be something that you can just glue literally into position. Overall though, I do like the model, and I think he looks a lot more intimidating than the current destroyers. In terms of war gear, Games Workshop have mentioned that he can either be armed with a Gauss Destructor or an Enmitic Exterminator, and unlike a lot of the other previewed units they showed in this same little preview, we have actually got pictures of this guy with both. This one I believe is the Gauss Destructor, just from the look of the barrel of the gun, and it really does ape the heavy Gauss cannon that we have in the Necron army at the moment. With that long barrel, I'd be surprised if it isn't a tank destroyer of some kind, maybe something similar to a 2-shot heavy Gauss cannon. We don't really know what the Enmitic Exterminators do. The only other Enmitic weapon I believe that we've come across is the one that's carried by the Auspex Lord, so it's a new class of weapons for the Necrons. They look a lot more broad-barreled though, so I'd expect either a more general purpose or anti-infantry role. If I had to guess, I would suspect that these are probably going to replace the standard destroyers, though I'm not absolutely certain of that. If these are literally called heavy destroyers, then there's always the possibility that they might keep around the smaller ones to act as standard destroyers. And they could also keep around the Destroyer Lord. I think it would be a bit of a strange move if they had a massive Necron release like this, and they didn't update all of those green rod kits, which are very much the last vestiges of the original Necron line. So I'd be very surprised if these don't supersede the standard destroyers. We might always see a non-heavy and Lord versions of these guys. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But otherwise I guess it's not 100% guaranteed that they're definitely going away. Here we have the other pictures of the Lokhust Heavy Destroyer. We had already seen some slightly further away shots of this guy, in that big Necron army shot, the one that they revealed the Silent King in. This one's armed with the Enmitic Annihilator. I went back to have a quick check with that Auspex Lord, and it does seem to be very much in the same style, so I'm pretty happy that this is that. With a couple of back and side shots, we can see that he's got a bunch of glowing power orbs, which seem to focus on quite a few of the Necron releases, and he certainly cuts a very intimidating silhouette on that black background. The gun looks utterly lethal. On the top right, we've got a bit of a size comparison to the standard Necron warrior. This guy really is a big hefty model, and is certainly far less of an analogue with his standard Necron kin, as is the destroyer on the bottom right. I think the way that his hovering is interesting. He doesn't have a long plastic rod connecting him to the base, much like the destroyer on the bottom right. I think there's a chunky plastic rod, whether or not it's clear we can't really see properly, but it's disguised under those rocks towards the back of the base. To be honest, the way that Games Workshop has been making flight stands recently, particularly on ones like the suppressors and the inceptors, I don't really think that this is a bad thing. Hopefully it'll be fairly sturdy, as you really don't want to be putting too much weight on this guy, otherwise he probably will snap quite easily. In game, I'm sure that mobile heavy fire support will never be a bad thing for a Necron list. With the 9th edition rules allowing full movement and firing of heavy weapons, things like destroyers might be getting a new lease of life. I strongly suspect that he'll be moving just as fast as the other ones, zooming around at 10 inches per turn, and being able to pick and choose his fights quite a bit easier than most models. Might be able to make use of some of this line of sight blocking terrain that's going to be a bit more prevalent, to maybe just aim at a certain unit and be safe from a lot of the rest of the army. Let's move on to the spindly Canoptek construct, the Canoptek Doomstalker then. This guy is pretty much a variant on the same chassis of the Reanimator from the Indomitus set, and where that one looks like it's going to be a support unit for putting the Necrons back up on their feet, this guy very much just looks like a walking gun platform. With that unusual spindly height and packing strange energy weapons, it definitely gives me a bit of a War of the Worlds type vibe, and I think they'll look pretty epic looming over the Necron legions as they advance towards the foe. In terms of the release, the Reanimator and the Doomstalker remind me very strongly of the Bloat Drone from the Dark Imperium box set. Basically in Dark Imperium, the Death Guard got an easy build featured Bloat Drone with the Plague Spitters, and then a few weeks later they released a multi-part set for the same model, where you could build the same thing with 3 different variants. I'd be very surprised indeed if we don't get the same thing here, an initial maybe slightly smaller easy build model of the Reanimator in the Indomitus set, and then a full-on multi-part plastic kit where you can build a Reanimator maybe with another option, and the Canoptek Doomstalker with this big gun. Obviously that's definitely not guaranteed, he could just be a model in and of himself, but I think that that's the most likely thing at the moment. In terms of the looks of this thing, I really quite like the way that the Canoptek construct is almost like sitting hunched at the top of those enormous spindly legs. I feel his little eye just looks a little bit friendly as well, even though the people he's vaporizing with that Doomsday Blaster would probably disagree. In terms of criticism of the model, I've seen some people talk about the wires and hydraulics, which isn't really something that we've seen too much of in the Necron range so far. In general, the vast majority of their models are incredibly high-tech looking, with unknown mystifying alien technology. And while that guy still has that going on, it just seems a bit weird that they couldn't find a way to move his legs without relying on technology that looks a little bit dated even to current human eyes. To be honest though, I think that you could probably get away with just snipping them off with plastic scissors, if they really did bother you and you wanted to have a more clean aesthetic on the legs and technology. In terms of its armament, it's armed with that Doomsday Blaster on the top, which looks like a smaller slimmed down version of the mighty Doomsday cannon that the Necron Doomsday Arc packs. Unlike all of the other releases, there haven't been any talk of other different weapons that you can give this guy, again making me think that the multi-build option could be the Reanimator, compared with just having a different gun on the top of him. They mentioned that the Doomsday Blaster can be fired on the move, or stay put for maximal firepower. That's very much a rule that we've already got on the Doomsday Arc as it is. Frankly, if you move the Doomsday Arc, then its firepower gets very underwhelming indeed, so I suspect that this guy is largely going to be a static fire support unit, only moving when you have literally no other choice, because I suspect his damage output's going to be pretty rubbish once you do move. On the plus side for a fire support unit like this, having a very good height is a decent advantage in 40k, he'll have a far better chance of seeing over hills and obstacles, although I guess those obscuring ruins could still ruin his day a bit. He does have the secondary defense system of a couple of Gauss flares, obviously not packing half as much a punch as the Doomsday Arc will be if you get close to it. And it also doesn't have the fly keyword either, so it's not going to be able to fall back and shoot for no penalty, provided that's still a thing in 9th. I do think that this guy is going to be competing with the Doomsday Arc for that similar role. They're both looking at like static fire support units, with the Doomsday Arc having the advantages of fly and a lot more Gauss flares in defense. So hopefully this guy's going to have a decent advantage in terms of damage output or durability per point, as otherwise he might see himself a little bit outcompeted by the Arc. I guess it does have the advantage of being able to take these in addition to Doomsday Arcs though, if just 3 Doomsday weapons aren't bringing quite enough Doomsday to your Necron army. One big question is whether or not this guy will be getting quantum shielding like a lot of the Necron vehicles do. At the moment I don't believe that the Canoptek constructs in general have access to the rule, so I wouldn't be enormously hopeful on this front. It seems to be largely in the reserve of the barges and arcs crewed by actual Necrons, but please let me know if I've missed anything. Here's a quick comparison to the Reanimator on the left and the Canoptek Doomstalker on the right. To me they really are looking quite similar in terms of the kit, with the Reanimator being squashed up and on a much tighter base, and it really does make me think of the sort of compromises that they'd be making by trying to make this an easy build kit and cram it into the Indomitus frames. It really doesn't look like the Reanimator's quite as tall either. Basically between the joints at the very top of his legs, there's a lot less space in between that and the bottom of his carapace, which to me looks like the main place where that extra height is being lost. I think it is quite nice to have two variants in a similar style though. It means that you can really go for a bit of a quadrupedal, spindly monstrosity look for your Necron army. Finally, here we have a few different views of the Canoptek Doomstalker, taken from that spin around that they gave us just at the end of that preview video. Again, a very imposing profile. I quite like the way that his Doomsday cannon is pointed slightly down, implying to me that he's just about to annihilate a foe that he's towering far over. Overall, I think it's quite a nice, creepy looking model. So let me know your thoughts on these guys then. Do they look like they'd be fitting into the Necron range well enough for you? And would you be looking to pick one up to go alongside a Necron army in 9th edition? If you enjoyed this quick review, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll be trying to keep up with the news from 9th edition, both from a gaming and new miniature releases perspective. If you've been enjoying all the content on the channel, any support on the Auspex Tactics Patreon page is massively appreciated, as it is what allows me to produce YouTube videos on a more full-time basis. As well as supporting the creation of new videos, channel patrons also get entered into regular prize draws on the channel, with one ticket in the draw for each $1 contributed. I'm looking to get my hands on 3 copies of the Indomitus box, and send them out to 3 different people as part of the August giveaway, so if you'd like to be in with a chance of winning that, then the Patreon's in the link in the description. A big thank you to my current patrons for helping make this channel possible. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.